Hey, what is up, everyone? It's Odin here. I'm about to start drawing on a brand. I gotta get less lazy with some of my words. Not say brand new, brand, brand new page. So my oldest brother would go crazy when people would say water. It's water, with a T, not a D. Whatever. He gives me a hard time about my laziness with words, but it happens sometimes. What can I say? So in a little bit, I'm gonna be watching Gabe El Taib's channel with Shanth Senjetti. I think I'm always butchering his name, but but they do Double Impact, and I talked about it last week. They did Karate Kid, and this week they're doing Red Dawn, which Gabe said he'd never seen, so he had to catch up. So it'll be fresh, which it's going to be hard because without the nostalgia, I think he's still going to like it, but without the nostalgia of seeing it as a kid. Because when you see it as a kid, it's definitely easier to project yourself into the situation and be like, that's what I would do. I would be a Wolverine. I would fight those commies. Commie invaders. So great movie. That'll be fun. I was just a little bit ago watching a bit of, there's a new, or it's fairly new. I don't know when it came out. It's new to me, but they did a Creepshow anthology series, and I mentioned it many times. I love anthology series. It reminds me of, all the ones I love. Tales from the Dark Side, Tales from the Crypt, Monsters, and obviously Twilight Zone, Outer Limits, Dark Shadows, all these shows that were great. Anthology series, but Twilight Zone will always be the best. There's no. But the Creepshow one so far has a very good feel to it that feels like it could be one of these older shows, and so I'm excited to watch more. So far, so good, and it has that element of kind of the 80s cheese that you want. So I'm excited to watch more, but I figured I'd draw and talk. What else? So on a new page, excuse me, I think about what's next in the story. So it's written, but how am I convey it? So I kind of do, I guess, my own version of the Marvel method, which is, even though I'm writing it, but I know what I want to have happen, and I don't script it out. I start drawing and see what happens, and I erase a lot, before, and it's basically thumbnails on the board, so I know what the opening scene is. It's going to be a panel roughly across the top here, pretty decent size. Bird's eye view. So I'm going to have my hero girl here, so draw her body, some legs in a ready stance, some boobies, because she's a girl. And it's bird's eye view, so you see those boobies just sticking out. Her head. And she's going to be in like a action type pose. It's a pretty far away scene, so there's her head. Let's see if we did boobies, legs. I'm going the wrong way. Very small, because we got to fit. We're gonna have to redraw almost. I don't know if I want to do that. I don't know. We're gonna start there and see. I'm like, do I want to redraw that whole? I just did the 2-page spread. Do I want to redraw that? Basically, that whole scene from a bird's eye view, just to initiate the action more, or do I go straight into the action? That is a question. I think what I could do, though, and this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to split this in two. So as I do this, I'm thinking this is a blank piece of paper. And there was I'm sure many of you, if you're around my age, will recall a show called Commander Mark. Mark Kessler, I think his name was. He was the coolest and one of the single most important people in my life in inspiring me to draw and getting me. So he was on whatever time every week, or I think it was every week, but it would have been nice if it was every day. But my brother and I waited, grabbed our tablets, our drawing tablets, our notebooks, sat at the TV glued, and drew with Commander Mark every time he was on. We were addicted and we loved him. But he would always say, conquer this page. He'd always say, we're going to conquer this page. This blank page. We're going to conquer it. He had lots of little isms that he had created and coined. But my favorite was he would end the show and he would always say, draw, draw, draw. Practice your drawing 24 hours a day. He didn't say 24 hours a day, but 15 hours a day, 10 hours a day, whatever he said. Draw, draw, draw. Practice your drawing 24 hours a day, and I'll see you next time. Yeah, Commander Mark. I think he had the Imagination Station. Does that ring a bell? It seems like something associated with it. Memory's not what it once was. But man, he was the coolest, and he had created this little race of like unicorn bears. They were like aliens, I guess. And then he had this big canvas wall, and he would use a Sharpie. And he would just add a little bit more each time and just start building this immersive landscape. He was a big fan of Dr. Seuss and that style, that kind of bloopy. So he would draw like foliage, but it would like hang and really bloopy off of the rocks and things like that. Such a cool show and seemingly cool guy. And he would make sound effects like, and we got this rocket ship, and they're firing. Fun. It was so much fun. So yeah, Commander Mark Kessler. I'm pretty sure that was his last name. And then later on, maybe like, I don't know, 10 years later, maybe 15 years later, I saw he had another show. It was all on PBS, Public Broadcasting. But, I saw he had another show that he was doing basically the same thing without the production, because Commander Mark, he had like, he would go from one area of the studio and then he'd walk over and do something over here, and then he had the big wall where he was drawing the big landscape, and then he had, for a time, he had this weird robot guy that would like come out and, I don't know what that was all about, but you know, it was just to make it fun. And he'd have like kids guests on the show, and they would show what they were working on, and then he'd have like fan submissions, and he had like this turnstile thing that would like, here's so and so's drawing, and turn around, and then here's so and so's submission, you know. And it was really cool. And I don't think I ever sent anything in, but I know I wanted to. I wanted to be on his show, but yeah, there's not much more I can point to as like a greater influence that made me want to draw than Commander Mark, for sure. I'm thinking the one other moment that I can point to that was very influential for me. I was probably like 4. It's like one of my earliest memories. This was my earliest Christmas memory. My parents, like, one of my gifts, it was a big, huge package, or not really huge, but it seemed huge to me as a little kid. And I opened it up, and it was just full of all manner of art supplies and stuff I didn't even know what it was. It was just like a box, and it wasn't like, something nowadays you get at Hobby Lobby. It's like, hey, 20 markers, 20 pastels, 20 colored pencils. It was like they'd bought all the stuff separately and just put it in one giant box and hand it to me. I opened it, and I was like, wow, this is cool. And I just remember, it's hard. It was a long time ago, obviously. I was like 4. I just remember they kept saying, you're an artist. You're an artist. This is the power of suggestion with like tiny toddler age kids. You're an artist. You're an artist. You're an artist. And, like, we got that for you because you're such an artist. You're such an artist. Because I must have been drawing a lot at that age. I don't remember drawing a lot before that, but I remember drawing a lot after that. And, and my imagination, even at that age, was just off the wall. I mean, I couldn't stop it. It just went. It went on its own, did its own thing, and what I wouldn't give for that same power of imagination right now. I still think of myself as an imaginative, creative person, but you're never as creative as you are at that age, because you're learning everything, but you're also wanting to create everything. And I remember we were pretty poor. I grew up relatively poor, and so I didn't always have like the cool action figures and every toy I wanted. It was always like a real big treat when I did get that kind of stuff, because I knew, even at a young age, I knew it was a strain on my parents to like even hook me up, with something cool. And I remember drawing all of these characters. I don't know if they were like wrestlers but I would draw some big, I would draw some like skinny, I would draw some, a little more agile or athletic, and I would name them, and I would create stats for them. And then I think at this time I wasn't creating stats for them, but I would cut them out like paper dolls, and those were my toys oftentimes. And then I remember later, as I got older, especially after I got into sports cards, because I was a big sports fan and loved sports cards. Again, it's kind of like I got an inheritance of them from somebody, and I'm like, this is amazing. They were all from like 1981. I had no idea who any of the players were, except for like the real big names. My parents would tell me, like, oh, Reggie Jackson, you don't know who he is? Like, Mr. October, come on. But I got into sports cards, and then I got into stats. And I don't think I've ever placed anywhere on the autism spectrum, but I would just sit there and memorize stats. I would look at the back of cards, and I'm like, oh yeah, Reggie Jackson hit 34 homers in 1974 or something like that, and which I don't think that's correct. It could be. That would be really funny, but I'm just using an example. But at the time, I could remember so many stats. And there's some that I still remember, and oftentimes they get referenced because they're like big numbers. Like, I know Eric Dickerson's 2,105 yards is the record for a single season rushing, and that was in 1984 or 85. Oh man, now I'm slipping. Was it 84 or was it 85? I don't know. But I remember reading that on a card, and then it would have a little italic thing, and it's like, set the rushing record of all time. I know O.J. Simpson in 1967, 2,003 yards. That was the initial mark. And since then, people have got 2,000 yards rushing, but nobody has got beyond Eric Dickerson's record. And with this modern age of football, I doubt it happened. Maybe Derrick Henry could do it, but it's passing league, so probably not. Yeah, so then I would draw and I would assign stats, for whatever thing I was drawing. It's like, if a guy was a mercenary, he's like 110 headshot kills or something, 110, 105 knife slit throats, So I would just add these stats. I would draw character profiles, like here's who he is, here's his name, here's his stats. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. Yeah, and I had a totally off changing subjects, but had like an audit tour from one of our clients today. Like they decided to audit their vendors, and which was fine. We had no idea what we were expecting. They're like, yeah, we're gonna show up and we just kind of want to like see your processes and make sure. And it's like, okay, we told them we're ISO 9001 certified, which means we have all the processes you could ever think of. It's ridiculous. It's way more than anybody needs, but it's part of the ISO standard. And not only that, but we get audited by them yearly. So I don't know why you need to do your own internal audits, but I think that's actually part of ISO standard, is that you audit your vendors, so that's something maybe they have to do. But, it was kind of ridiculous and took like almost 3 hours, where I had to be like on point the whole time. And part of it's because so I do design, but I wear a lot of hats. I'm also basically an assistant to the quality administrator who works in Seattle at our other plant. So I have to be there for all this stuff. And also, I'm the only one who is involved in the tour who knows our machinery backwards and forwards and knows all our capabilities and can speak to that. So I had to give this long tour and walk them through our plan, be like, this is this machine, and we do this here. And they came out from Butte, Montana. All the way from Butte, Montana. Or as I call it, Butt. Of course. I don't know if anyone ever watches, or watched, Whose Line Is It Anyway? I loved that show. It was so ridiculous, but they would do that skit or whatever, not skit, but game, scenes from a hat, and then they would just read something from a hat, and then everybody would act out whatever the thing was he read. And it was like state songs that got rejected. And the one guy, Ryan Stiles, the tall guy, he walks over, he goes, "It's called Butte, not Butt, Montana." Simple little joke, but on the fly, they were always pretty amazing at improv. I was pretty impressed. So I'm kind of stumped here, and I think if I keep talking, I'll probably just end up drawing something, but maybe something I don't want. So I'm probably gonna end this video. I had about an hour before the double impact stream. I may see what else is on and also cook me some food, but yeah, this is Odin, and hey, if you get a chance, check out that Creepshow. It is pretty cool. And if anybody watches it, then I'd have somebody to talk about it with. I don't know how well it did. The reviews were mixed. Most people who were reviewing it were like me, wanting it to be like the old movies. Stephen King was a great short story writer as well. Rod Serling, I think, is the best, and the writing staff for Twilight Zone, not just Rod Serling. I mean, there was I'm blanking on their names. Some really good writers, really good directors that kind of worked in tandem. And it's funny as you watch these generationally, people who work on them together, or writers that write for them. So, like when Tales from the Dark Side got canceled and they started doing Monsters, it was like you would see all the same writers from Tales from the Dark Side were writing for Monsters when that came out, you know, and some of them had written for Tales from the Crypt, and you know, it was like they just became known as anthology horror writers. And it's fun because some of those are, you know, they're so cheesy, but they have to be written in that short story style. You know, basically invoking archetypical characters, but the twist ending. You know, and sometimes the twist, you're like, really? You know, that's not the best. And if the episode's good or it's so much fun, then you go, well, it was worth it. That would be something that would be fun, is to break down some of those old Tales from the Dark Side and Monsters episodes. There's a million people breaking down Twilight Zone episodes, which would be a lot of fun too, especially because Twilight Zone's episodes had something deeper than anything these other guys put out, and it was a real strong sense of a moral to the story, you know. So as they tell this twist ending and the narration, so, you know, like on Tales from the Crypt, you know, it's the Crypt Keeper, and, you know, he's just hilarious and awesome. But Rod Serling himself, you know, imagine if you will, and, you know, like a small town, you know, gripped by terror, and he was smoking a cigarette and stuff. He would do that and have his closing monologue, and so sometimes so profound, you know. I mean, I know like, Jerry Springer would do his final thoughts at the end of his shows, but that's the kind of thing. It's a summarization, but it's like a well-written, kind of succinct, just a way to project that end moral and leave it stuck in your brain. And his voice, his delivery, his whole approach to the Twilight Zone, the music obviously was iconic. I mean, all these shows had great iconic openings, so that you kind of go, yeah, it's on. And like, I'll watch the openings every time when they're good like that, because, you know, because like in modern streaming things, they go, skip the intro. I'm like, hell no, I ain't skipping the intro. This thing's awesome. So, anyway, that would be fun to, you know, but I just don't know how many people even care about. Like, I would like to do the one Monsters, because I recently watched all of those. And they were fun. There were some really big whiffs in that series, but it was a lot of fun. Like I said, I'd stay away from Twilight Zone because everybody does reviews and, you know, opinion pieces on Twilight Zone episodes. But it'd be fun just to do the new one, the Creepshow, because I watched 2. Because there were 2 on each episode, so hour-long episodes. But again, it's about the same length as Monsters and stuff. The first one was called Gray Matter, and it was all right. It was fun, intense. And what was the second one called? It was about a dollhouse, and it was pretty creepy, and it was fun. So both of them did their job. They were creepy and fun, and that's what I think of. And when I think of the old comic book versions, creepy and eerie, and again, Tales from the Crypt, they had that same element, because the comics were very well drawn most of the time, but it was half cartoonish, half realistic, really fun style. And I try to accomplish that a lot with my own work on this book, and probably the whole thing because it's anthology style. That's what we're doing. So hopefully we'll capture that, and I may be even more mindful of it as it goes forward because I think it's so fun. I think it's some of the best imagery, and horror movies are great when they scare the shit out of you and they're just fucked up or something. That's all great. But I really think it's so awesome to have that element of fun with a horror movie. And, like that's why I like campy horror movies. Even ones that aren't campy, but they have some elements of humor. So like John Carpenter's The Thing. John Carpenter will always have, not always, I guess, some of his didn't, but for the most part will always throw in some humor. And whenever he cast Kurt Russell, like Kurt Russell's delivery always has that subtle element of humor where you almost laugh at it even if it's not meant to be funny because it's Kurt Russell saying it. So I found that in when I watched Tombstone recently. I find that in The Thing as McCready. Just some of the things he says, but it's because of he's saying it and how he's saying it. I know in The Hateful Eight, he kept saying, horse shit. And every time he'd say that, I'd get a little giggle out of me because of his delivery. I can't even, do it right. It was just... Anyway. That's all I got for today. I'm going to keep working on this while I watch Double Impact. But I hope everybody out there is doing awesome. Pure awesome. And until next time, see ya.